Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into one of the most shocking and alarming news stories making waves across the world. Reports are emerging of a catastrophic escalation in the Middle East, with claims that 50 Israelis have been killed following a joint offensive that involves Iran, Egypt, Qatar, Yemen, and Hamas. The situation is being described as one of the deadliest developments in modern regional history, and the implications for global security, politics, and humanity are enormous. In this video, we will break down what has been reported, why this matters, and how the international community is reacting. Please remember that in fast-moving conflicts, details can change and numbers may be contested. But our goal here is to provide you with a clearer picture of the crisis. The figure of 50 killed is staggering. For a country like Israel, with a population of just over 9 million, such losses would represent one of the most devastating blows in its modern existence. The sheer scale of destruction would dwarf even the most infamous wars in the region. To put that number into context, Israel has never faced casualties on such a scale. Even in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, the Six-Day War of 1967, or the Yom Kippur War of 1973. This reported toll signals not just a military strike, but a coordinated campaign aimed at overwhelming Israel's defense systems and bringing the nation to its knees. The involvement of Iran, Egypt, Qatar, Yemen, and Hamas presents a unique situation. Traditionally, while Israel has faced hostility from multiple fronts, direct cooperation of this scale across multiple states and non-state actors has been rare. Iran has long supported proxy groups like Hezbollah and Hamas with funding, weapons, and training. But the suggestion that states like Egypt and Qatar are now openly aligned in direct conflict raises enormous questions about how alliances in the Middle East are shifting. Qatar has often played a mediating role in regional conflicts, while Egypt has historically had a peace treaty with Israel since 1979. If these reports of Egyptian involvement are accurate, it would mean a dramatic reversal of decades of diplomacy. Iran's role is unsurprising, as it has consistently positioned itself as Israel's greatest adversary in the region. Tehran views Israel as illegitimate and has made no secret of its goal to oppose Israeli influence. In recent years, Iran has ramped up its missile programs, its cyber capabilities, and its support of regional militias. Yemen's involvement can be linked to its Houthi movement, which has been closely tied to Iran. The Houthis have demonstrated their ability to launch missiles and drones at targets far beyond Yemen's borders, including Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. If they have joined this coalition, it would suggest a much broader regional escalation orchestrated by Tehran. Hamas, meanwhile, remains a central player. Based in Gaza, Hamas has fought multiple wars with Israel over the past 2 decades, but joining in a coalition alongside major states would elevate their operations to a new level of intensity. Their arsenal of rockets, combined with Iranian-supplied precision technology, could overwhelm Israel's Iron Dome defense system. A massive, coordinated strike from multiple directions could explain how such catastrophic losses were inflicted in such a short span of time. The scale of this reported offensive raises questions about how Israel's intelligence community did not detect it beforehand. Israel's intelligence agencies, particularly Mossad and Shin Bet, are widely considered among the most effective in the world. The surprise of such an attack would represent an intelligence failure on par with, or even worse than, what happened in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War, when Israel was caught off guard by coordinated Egyptian and Syrian offensives. The 50 deaths, if confirmed, suggest not just a sudden strike, but also prolonged battles and possibly even incursions into Israeli territory. The political implications inside Israel would be immense. Israeli society is deeply militarized and resilient, but no democracy can absorb such catastrophic losses without profound consequences. There would be national mourning, outrage, and calls for massive retaliation. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has already been facing political crises and public protests, would be under enormous pressure. His government would either have to respond with unprecedented military force or risk collapse. This could push Israel to launch a full-scale war against Iran and its allies, potentially drawing in the United States. Speaking of the United States, Washington's role in this conflict is critical. The U.S. is Israel's closest ally and has long guaranteed its security with military aid, advanced weapons, and diplomatic backing. An attack that kills 50,000 Israelis would almost certainly trigger American involvement. We could see U.S. aircraft carriers moving into the Mediterranean and Persian Gulf, airstrikes against Iranian targets, and increased military aid flowing into Israel. Such a scenario could spiral into a regional war, with global consequences for energy markets, international security, and geopolitics. The European Union and NATO would also be forced to respond. Many European countries have deep trade ties with both Israel and Arab states. But the sheer magnitude of this crisis would compel Western governments to take sides. The United Nations would likely call for emergency sessions, but the Security Council would be paralyzed, with Russia and China blocking resolutions that condemn Iran and its allies. The divisions between global powers would deepen, and the Middle East would become the flashpoint of a new Cold War dynamic. For Arab states, the situation is complicated. While some governments like Iran and Qatar might support this coalition openly, others such as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Jordan would be deeply cautious. Saudi Arabia has been moving closer to normalizing relations with Israel in recent years, a process supported by the United States. This attack would put Riyadh in an extremely difficult position. Supporting the coalition would derail its Western partnerships, while opposing it could create tensions with populations sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. On the humanitarian side, the toll would be devastating. 50,000 lives lost in Israel would mean tens of thousands of families torn apart, cities scarred, and entire communities wiped out. Civilian infrastructure, hospitals, schools, and religious sites would likely have been hit in the strikes. Israel's medical system would be overwhelmed, and emergency aid from abroad would be essential. On the other side, retaliation by Israel would almost certainly inflict casualties across Gaza, Lebanon, and possibly even Iran and Yemen. The human suffering on both sides would be catastrophic, creating one of the largest humanitarian crises of the 21st century. Global markets would react violently. The Middle East remains the heart of the world's energy supply. Any regional war involving Iran threatens the Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant percentage of the world's oil passes. If Iran were to block or disrupt that shipping lane, global oil prices would skyrocket, triggering economic crises worldwide. Stock markets would crash, inflation would soar, and ordinary people across the globe would feel the economic shockwaves. Airlines would reroute flights, tourism would collapse, and the sense of global insecurity would deepen. The psychological impact on Israel's population would be immense. The nation has lived with existential threats since its founding, but the death of 50,000 people would shake the country to its core. Survivors would face trauma, children would grow up scarred by violence, and the sense of vulnerability would be stronger than ever. At the same time, Israeli society has historically shown resilience in times of crisis, and it is likely that this tragedy would fuel an even stronger determination to fight back and survive. Internationally, protests and demonstrations would erupt. Around the world, people would take to the streets, either in solidarity with Israel or in support of Palestinians and the coalition forces. Social media would explode with disinformation, propaganda, and emotional calls to action. The digital battlefield would be just as fierce as the physical one, as governments and activists attempt to shape narratives and influence global opinion. The moral and ethical debates would be intense. Supporters of the coalition would argue that Israel's policies toward Palestinians, particularly in Gaza and the West Bank, have created unbearable conditions that justify resistance. Supporters of Israel would insist that the mass killing of civilians is unjustifiable and represents an act of terrorism on an unprecedented scale. The international legal community would debate whether these actions amount to war crimes or crimes against humanity, and pressure would mount on institutions like the International Criminal Court to respond. Religion would also play a role in shaping reactions. For many, the conflict between Israel and its neighbors has always carried deep religious significance. The involvement of multiple Muslim majority states and movements would intensify the perception of this as not just a political or military conflict, but also a religious one. Religious leaders around the world would call for peace, but extremist groups would seize the opportunity to inflame tensions further. Technology and modern warfare tactics would also come under scrutiny. Israel has long been known for its cutting-edge defense systems like the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow. If 50,000 lives were lost despite these systems, it would raise questions about whether they were overwhelmed, sabotaged, or bypassed with new technologies such as hypersonic missiles, swarming drones, or cyber attacks. The lessons learned from this conflict would shape global military strategies for years to come. At the same time, the role of diplomacy would not disappear. Even in moments of war, back-channel negotiations often take place. Qatar, despite being named as part of the coalition, has historically served as a mediator between Israel and Hamas. Turkey could also attempt to position itself as a broker, seeking to increase its influence in the Muslim world. China, with its growing interest in Middle Eastern stability for its Belt and Road Initiative, might attempt to mediate, while Russia could use the crisis to distract from its own conflicts and increase its standing as a power broker. For ordinary people in the region, the situation would be terrifying. In Israel, families would be sheltering in bunkers, fearing rocket attacks and military strikes. In Gaza, civilians would brace for Israeli retaliation, knowing they would bear the brunt of the response. In Iran, Egypt, Yemen, and Qatar, ordinary citizens would also face uncertainty as their governments engage in war. Borders could close, economies could collapse, and entire populations could be dragged into conflict they did not choose. The aftermath of such a war would likely reshape the Middle East for decades. Borders could be redrawn, governments could fall, and new alliances could form. The Abraham Accords, which aimed to normalize relations between Israel and several Arab states, would collapse entirely. Instead, we could see the emergence of a hardened anti-Israel coalition that dominates Middle Eastern politics. The U.S. might be forced to commit even more resources to the region, while China and Russia exploit the crisis for their own strategic gains. History teaches us that wars in the Middle East rarely stay confined. Just as the First and Second World Wars were triggered by events in Europe, it is not impossible that a massive escalation in the Middle East could trigger a larger global conflict. With nuclear powers like the U.S., Russia, and possibly Israel itself involved, the risks of a catastrophic escalation cannot be dismissed. This crisis is also a reminder of how fragile peace can be. For decades, diplomats have tried to negotiate solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Countless summits, treaties, and peace processes have come and gone. But the core issues, land, security, refugees, and recognition, remain unresolved. Until these issues are addressed, the cycle of violence will continue, and tragedies on this scale will remain a terrifying possibility. As the dust settles, the world will ask tough questions. How did intelligence agencies fail to prevent this? Could diplomacy have averted it? What role did external powers play in fueling the conflict? And perhaps most importantly, how can humanity ensure that such mass killing does not happen again? These questions will dominate international debate long after the immediate fighting ends. In conclusion, the reported deaths of 50,000 Israelis at the hands of a coalition involving Iran, Egypt, Qatar, Yemen, and Hamas marks a turning point in modern history. It represents not just a military tragedy but a humanitarian disaster, a political earthquake, and a potential trigger for wider global conflict. While the details are still emerging, what is clear is that the Middle East has entered a new and dangerous chapter. The world must brace itself for the consequences, and leaders everywhere must recognize the urgency of pursuing peace before it is too late. Thank you for watching and staying informed. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this crisis will escalate into a global war? Or is there still a chance for diplomacy to prevail? As always, we will continue to monitor this